Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please?
Covering both sides of the big issues with the analysis you trust on News Radio 1040 WHO.
Speaking of those Trump efficiency efforts, of course, you're hearing the demand that federal employees get back to the office. Employers have been doing that for some time now, and that means workplace romance is back, baby. So what do you need to know about the legal ins and outs of that? Well, legal expert Javier Pérez is back on the Davison Family Dentistry Newsmaker line to talk to me about that. Javier, welcome back to WHO Radio. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
All right, Javier, there's this old saying, never fish off the company pier. But, you know, a lot of people, they've been home for a long time. Now they're back at the office. So what are the do's and don'ts of dating in the workplace?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're going to see an uptick as people are back in person. Best thing to keep in mind is that it will get messy, and you need to kind of keep those risks in mind before you think about pursuing an office relationship, especially when it's someone you work closely with, and even more so if one of you is a supervisor. All of those things can make, a relationship that runs its course and ends extremely awkward and uncomfortable for a lot of people if it gets to that point.
Well, and given that, Javier, does a boss ever have legal standing, or a supervisor ever have legal standing to say, hey, you guys, cut it out? We're not allowing that in the office.
So an employer can say, we don't allow that at all from anyone. What they can't do is kind of play favorites or discriminate in that way. If they make a blanket rule that says we do not allow, romantic relationships among employees, that's permissible. They just have to apply it evenly to everybody.
And can you put a rule in place, so Javier, like you said, that sounds fair to me, that it applies to everybody and nobody at all. But what about like dating a boss or a boss dating a subordinate? Can you just say that's specifically not allowed? You can because being a supervisor is not a legally protected class. And in fact, that's kind of the riskiest configuration for an employer, because if there is some allegation of harassment, sexual harassment in particular, in that relationship, things go south or there's some other kind of issue going on, the employer can be held liable for the acts of the supervisor. And that's the case here in Texas as well. You can be held personally liable as a supervisor for that sort of thing. So that's really the riskiest, circumstance for that. And, I think employers would be wise to look out for that. One thing they can do pretty simply is once a lot of companies will require a romance to be reported to HR, and then HR will kind of, maybe transfer somebody so they're not in the same chain of command. Legal expert Javier Pérez. So, Javier, yeah, it's interesting because you were just bringing up all of the legal landmines that you can hit in office romance. So I would assume an employee has to really be careful, too, if he or she is trying to be romantic or make a romantic gesture toward a coworker. You got to be really careful, don't you? Because that can be construed as harassment. Is that true?
Yeah, that's true. I think especially in that context, you don't want to be, what would otherwise be considered like persistent, or, trying to court or woo somebody, put the moves on them, because, if there's an initial rejection of those advances, then continuing them can legally meet the standard for harassment. So definitely something to keep in mind. If someone's not interested, if it's a coworker, you probably just need to leave it alone.
Legal expert Javier Pérez on workplace romance. Javier, thanks for joining us this morning.